Sometimes challenges are best met backwards. Less metaphorically, sometimes the answers to our questions and solutions to our problems can be found by looking to those who have come before us. Indeed, many questions and problems are timeless and have already been answered by history. For instance, I don't need to use trial and error to figure out how to make a decent loaf of banana bread. I can look to history's record in a cookbook. When I need to secure a minnow to a hook, I need not figure it out for myself, only to ask my father or grandfather for guidance. This, then, looking to the past for answers to the challenges that confront us today, shall be the strategy that guides this lecture. Indeed, last week we encountered egoism. As I hope to show, both the psychological and ethical varieties of egoism pose unique challenges to traditional morality. However, I think it is unnecessary for us to formulate replies to these challenges ourselves. Indeed, the replies can be found by looking back in history. Way back, all the way back, in fact, to Plato's masterpiece, The Republic. For, if I am correct, Plato here offers replies to the challenges psychological and ethical egoism pose to traditional morality, replies that have stood unmatched throughout the history of philosophy. Now, in order for you to understand how egoism challenges traditional morality, it is important for you to first understand what I mean by traditional morality. So then, by traditional morality, I simply mean the belief that moral goods are good in themselves, that we do good things for their own sake, not for the sake of something else. Indeed, most people and ethical theorists tend to think that morally good things, things like telling the truth, refusing to murder, and so on, are good irrespective of whether they win you friends, fortune, safety, or even divine approval, that things like this are good in themselves. So then, how do psychological and ethical egoism challenge this traditional claim that morality is good in itself? Let's look at the challenge of psychological egoism. First, if you remember, psychological egoism, as advocated by folks like Hobbes, says that we are motivated solely by self-interest. Under such a theory, people only ever act so as to fulfill their appetites and avoid their aversions. The problem is, when people act in this natural way, they inevitably come into conflict. If, for instance, I develop a desire for your house, I may try to take it, which will clearly lead to a fight. So, in order to avoid the suffering that always accompanies conflicts like this, people develop various rules such as you can't take your neighbor's house. These rules, which we call morality, are thus a form of compromise. They put a limit on our freedom to fulfill our appetites so that suffering can be avoided. According to psychological egoism, morality is therefore not good in itself, but is rather a form of compromise made in order to lessen suffering. Now, even though Plato disagrees with this type of thinking, he believes it really does challenge traditional morality. In fact, he tells us the following story to show us just how deep this challenge goes. Suppose you find a ring you could put on and become invisible. Not only does it make you invisible to people, it also makes you invisible to God. In short, while you are wearing the ring, you can do whatever you want without any consequences whatsoever. The question is, would you still be morally good? Now, if you answer no, then psychological egoism must be true. It must be the case, in other words, that what is ultimately good is acting according to our aversions and appetites, and that morality is just a sort of compromise we make in order to limit our suffering. If, on the other hand, you answer yes, then traditional morality must be correct in saying that morality is good in itself. Plato, of course, wants to answer yes, wants to say that it is good to act morally even when we have complete freedom to do otherwise. But he doesn't think that this is the obviously correct answer. Therefore, he offers an argument showing us why we should act morally, even while we are wearing the magical ring, why, in other words, morality is good in itself. Plato's argument begins with the old adage that there are many ways to be wrong, while only one way to be right. In other words, morality, whether it is utilitarian, Kantian, or anything else, provides us with a certain single way of acting. Without morality, on the other hand, we have no such guidance. We simply go after our appetites and avoid our aversions. This, then, Plato notes, is why psychological egoists are quite correct in pointing out that without morality, people will come into conflict. Indeed, without the set way of acting and living, people's lives will inevitably clash. However, Plato continues, these conflicts of interest are not limited to those occurring between people. Indeed, these conflicts also occur on the level of a single person. Let's say, for instance, that I all of a sudden have a simultaneous desire or appetite to join the Swiss mafia, rob a bank down the street, and donate my time to the homeless shelter downtown. Without the guidance of morality, I would have no way to decide which of these things to do. The result is that I would come into conflict with myself. My appetites would begin wrestling with each other, creating a constant state of internal civil war. Now, this is clearly not desirable. Indeed, a person constantly at war with himself would never be able to do anything, would wind up as an immobile, inactive, indecisive lump of turmoil. This, then, Plato concludes, is why one should act morally, even while wearing the magical ring. Indeed, it is only through morality that we have guidance, only through morality that we can thus avoid the inner conflict and ultimate indecision that accompanies immorality. Therefore, morality is indeed something good in itself. It is good for us to be moral, even when we have the complete freedom to do otherwise. Therefore, morality is not merely a compromise, and psychological egoism must be false. With this, Plato has offered what I feel is a very good reply to the challenge psychological egoism poses to the traditional understanding that morality is good in itself. However, Plato still has to deal with the second challenge of egoism, the challenge posed by ethical egoism. If you remember, ethical egoism, of the type advocated by Nietzsche, claims that that not only are humans motivated by self-interest, but that humans should be motivated by self-interest. That living according to self-interest is synonymous with living the good life. Indeed, according to Nietzsche, living according to any form of traditional morality, from Kantianism to Christianity, makes us resentful and life-denying slaves. As such, traditional morality ultimately inhibits a person's ability to live the good life. According to ethical egoism, morality is therefore not good in itself, as traditionally thought, but is the precise opposite. Now, once again, Plato completely disagrees with the claims of egoism. However, like the challenge of psychological egoism, Plato thinks that this challenge of ethical egoism is a good one, and thus offers the following, admittedly slightly modified story in order to show us how deep the challenge goes. Suppose there are two men, Manny and Miguel. Manny is a completely morally good person, and Miguel is completely morally bad. Now, Miguel is so good at deceiving people and being bad, not only is he surrounded by wealth and friends, he has also managed to convince everyone that he is in fact a completely good guy. Manny, on the other hand, while completely morally good, has a terrible life. He has no possessions and no friends, and what is more, he doesn't even have a reputation for being good. Everyone believes him to be completely morally corrupt. So of these two men, which is living the good life, Manny or Miguel? If you answer Miguel, then ethical egoism must be true. It must be the case, in other words, that morality is not something that helps us live the good life, but rather something that gets in the way of living such a good life. If you answer Manny, on the other hand, then it must be the case that morality is indeed part of the good life, that morality really is good in and of itself. Plato, of course, wants to answer that Manny is living the good life. But just as Plato thought it was far from obvious that one should be moral even while wearing the magical ring, so too he thinks it is far from obvious that Manny is living a better life than Miguel. Therefore, Plato offers an argument to support his belief. The argument starts with two rather generic claims. First, Plato observes that everything has a function, and only one function that is unique to it. For instance, the function of an eye is seeing, the function of a hammer is pounding nails, and so on and so forth. Second, Plato continues, we call something good or virtuous when a thing does its function well. So we call an eye good when it sees well. We call a hammer good when it pounds nails well, and so on and so forth. Now, continues Plato, we can apply these generic claims to humans. First, then, it must be the case that humans have a function, and only one function that is unique to them. Plato proposes that this function of the human is acting, that the function of the human is doing things as guided by some amount of reasonable deliberation. This is, as we have seen throughout the course of the semester, a fairly typical way of thinking about what it is that makes a human human. Okay, so if the function of the human is being able to act, then a good human must be one who acts well. We've already seen, however, that an immoral human is not able to act well. Indeed, an immoral human has no guidance for action and so winds up in a constant state of inner turmoil, conflict, and indecision. Therefore, morality, by offering people a set way of acting, ultimately allows them to function well as a human and so live the good life. This, then, according to Plato, is why Manny, not Miguel, is living the good life. Indeed, while it may appear that Miguel's life is good, this life is rather similar to beating a drum with a hammer. Sure, a hammer might make more noise than a drumstick, but drum beating is not what a hammer was meant to do. Similarly, Miguel, while making more noise than Manny by living immorally, is simply not living as humans are meant to live, and so is not living the good life. Therefore, morality, and allowing the human to function properly, is indeed good in itself. Therefore, morality does not, as ethical egoism claims, get in the way of a good life.